and welcome to the Mask Fanatic. Mask Fanatics, time to talk about masks, like we do every week up here in the attic above Horror Hotel. Let me just start by pointing out that I am in an attic right now, okay? That's A-T-T-I-C, the attic. And about 5 to 10 minutes from here, maybe a 10-minute drive, there's a small town called Attica, which is spelled just like attic, but with an A on the end, A-T-T-I-C-A. So I'm in an attic, and I'm very near to a place called Attica. I'm pretty sure there's a pun involved somewhere in there, but I can't really find it just now off the top of my head. So what I'm going to do is just leave you with the components of the pun and leave you to construct it on your own. Sort of a do-it-yourself pun kit, because I'm sure there's a play on words in there somewhere. But anyway, way back in 1968, one of the most influential horror movies ever came out, and that was, of course, what was it? Oh yeah, Night of the Living Dead. And that movie, of course, has been exploited and analyzed and researched and overanalyzed, actually, and deconstructed, reconstructed, copied, ripped off, imitated, sequelized, prequelized, etc., ever since. And it's still having an almost incalculable influence on the horror genre as a whole. You probably know it was the first movie to have zombies, although they don't use that term in the script, they just call them ghouls. The first movie to have zombies who were flesh eaters, who ate people, and who could only be killed by a blow or shot to the head. That was the first movie. The one that started that whole hit him in the head thing was Night of the Living Dead. Now, 1968, monster masks were certainly, going strong. By 1968, there were all the Universal monsters, Frankenstein, Dracula, Mummy, Wolfman, Creature, Mr. Hyde, etc. But no masks came out in 1968 of the Night of the Living Dead zombies. And I think maybe the reasons for that were twofold. For one thing, Halloween way back then was thought of as much more of a children's holiday than the way we think of it now. In 1968, not nearly so many adults were involved in Halloween activities for their own pleasure, their own enjoyment. The adults who were doing Halloween back then were doing it more for the sake, for the amusement, for the entertainment of their kids than themselves. But all these years later, things have changed, and now Halloween is a huge adult holiday. But anyway, in 1968 it was more of a kids holiday, and kids really shouldn't have been seeing Night of the Living Dead in 1968. It was much more bleak and depressing and hopeless, and therefore disturbing than many of the horror films that kids would have been able to see back at that time. So the world of masks sometimes has wheels that turn very slowly indeed. And if you've ordered masks from a lot of private artists, you know what I'm talking about. But it took 22 years, is that right? Yeah, 22 years for official, approved by the filmmakers, masks to come along from Night of the Living Dead. This one being the one called Graveyard Ghoul. Now this, of course, was the first zombie in the movie, and really the most important zombie in the movie, because he's the one that gets the ball rolling. That was you, wasn't it? Yeah. As portrayed by Bill Heinzman. Bill Heinzman was the guy in the gray makeup who was staggering around in the cemetery at the beginning, and was the first zombie that you see in the movie. Why didn't they make masks? Apart from my theory that it was more of a kids' holiday back then, the other reason I think they didn't do masks from Night of the Living Dead is that they weren't interesting looking monsters. They were really just people who were kind of pale with, unhealthy complexions and dark circles under their eyes. And I think I've just described myself. Can we edit that? Just a little? No? Okay. Anyway, the masks that came out in 1990 were from the folks at American Maskin' Novelty, a great company which sadly went out of business in 1993, I do believe. Now, in addition to Graveyard Ghoul, which was probably the best, I think it's my favorite of the four masks, all of which were sculpted by Ray Hikas, mastermind, owner, founder, and cook and bottle washer for American Mask and Novelty. I think this one was my favorite. It was Bill Heinzman, but there was also the Creepy Karen. That's right. Now, Creepy Karen, a very iconic image too in the movie, was the scary little dead girl with her hair over one eye. And well, the mask, the wig thing didn't work that well with the mask. These masks that I'm showing you here, and again, this is just between us, okay? Just between you and me and the dead bodies rotting back in the other part of the attic. These have been painted by me and haired by Laura, my long-suffering wife, so they look a little more deluxe than the production copies, but they are the same pieces, the same sculptures, just a little nicer makeup and hair going on. But this was, of course, Creepy Karen, the little girl played by Kyra Schoen in the movie, and yeah, we'll do that. But see, that's cool. Now, if you're thinking that doesn't really look perfect, it really doesn't, because for one thing, she was a little kid in the movie, and it was felt that this was iconic of an image, sufficiently iconic of an image, that it really needed to be done as a mask and as a collector prop, even though an adult woman couldn't really wear a mask that looked like the head of a little kid. So some concessions were made in the area of shape and form and size to try to make it something that was still in the ballpark of looking like the way she looked in the film, but was also big enough that it wouldn't look silly for an adult to wear it at Halloween, and that it would fit on an adult human head. Okay, and these were, I don't know if you can see how far that comes down. It was actually a full head mask. It wasn't just a face mask with a wig. It actually had the full back and a bit of a neck on there. The makeup on all these was just sort of pale flesh to gray, similar to the way I painted them, but not quite as elaborately. Now, if that's still not enough for you, if you still can't get enough zombies, there was also Mangled Maryland. That's right, and this one, Mangled Maryland, number 3 in the series, not as popular as the first two. For one thing, because nobody knows this zombie. But if you came away from the movie, you would certainly remember Bill Heinzman creeping around scaring people, and you would certainly remember the scary little dead girl with her one rolled up eye looking up at you, which actually has a whole different effect on an adult. It's kind of sexy. So it has a whole different look than it does on a little dead kid. But anyway, the third one, Mangled Maryland, so named because this particular ghoul or zombie was played by Marilyn Eastman, who was also in the movie as one of the human characters, but just briefly, just very briefly, got to do a bit as a zombie who picks a bug or something. I think it was I don't know what kind of a bug, some type of bug off of a tree and eats it. Now this one also is less recognizable, not only because it was only in the movie for 2 seconds, but because this isn't really what it looked like. Again, concessions were made because it was felt that the original makeup, which basically looked like Marilyn Eastman after being hit in the side of the head with a plate of cottage cheese, was not really that visually arresting as far as making an interesting Halloween mask. So she just had a little bit of lumpy glop on the one side of her face, a little bit of oatmeal or something over there. But this was sort of rethought with this shriveled and more mutilated look to it, just in the interest of making a cooler mask. But it is a licensed Night of the Living Dead official collectible. And there's more, but wait, there's more. Finally, the fourth in the series was called Dead John. Now, Dead John, again, this one probably looks the least of any of them like what was in the movie. You would probably have no idea what this was supposed to be, because in the movie, John Russo, who was one of the writers, producers, etc., John Russo played a zombie briefly too, and he had a little bit of glopola on one side of the face, again with the cottage cheese, and then he had a small hole in his face, but it didn't look like much. It was just sort of plain and smooth, and he hadn't been dead very long, and it was just, you know, it worked in the film, but it's not the kind of thing from which really good collectible Halloween masks are made. So in 1990, when these were created, it was decided, as with Mangled Maryland, to stylize it a little and exaggerate quite a bit and come up with something you know, cooler and more interesting as a mask than just a middle-aged guy with a small hole in his face and a slightly rough side on his. You see what I'm saying? You get it? You with me? You understand? Sure you do. So Dead John here, which is probably the rarest of the four, doesn't look that much like he looked in the movie, but it's still got some John Russo-iness in it, and once again it is an official licensed Night of the Living Dead collectible from the year 1990. Delectable collectibles. So now of these four, as I have said, my favorites were these two because they look the most like what was in the movie and because they were the more important zombies in the movie. These two, not as much accuracy and not as much of a need to own them in your zombie collection as these two. However, some people would give an arm and a leg and a lower intestine for Dead John or Mangled Maryland because they're harder to find. Now, of these masks, I believe maybe only a couple hundred were made of Graveyard Ghoul, Bill Heinzman, and Creepy Karen, Kyra Schoen. I think a couple hundred were made. These two, however, John and Marilyn here, they never even made it to 100. Only maybe like 60 or 70 copies. And when you consider there are 7 billion people, or nearly 7 billion, on the planet, clearly a few dozen is not enough to go around. So they're very scarce and highly sought after. The molds have been gone forever, from what I've been told. And all four of them are cool pieces of horror movie historic collector memorabilia. So if you're into zombies, and gosh, who isn't, look for the American Mask and Novelty Night of the Living Dead series. Dead John, Graveyard Ghoul, Creepy Karen, Mangled Maryland, all sculpted by the incredibly talented and clever Ray Hikas, and all hard to find today, but they do turn up on eBay and places like that. So keep looking for them. Oh, bubble wrap.